Hi, this is Mashnu. Now, last week I uploaded a video with the title The Power of the Bishop. Perhaps you saw it, and I find it actually very useful to repeat the same type of endgames a few times, because it's very instructive when you start recognizing the same patterns in different examples, different endgames. So I found this one, and we see here again an endgame of bishop against knight. And perhaps you remember that I told you in the previous video that when we have endgames with pawns on both wings, then usually the bishop is stronger than the knight, because the bishop can cover both wings at the same time, and the knight is slower. Now in this position, it's white to move, and perhaps you would like to pause the video and have a look and see if you can assess the position and see what you would do with white here, and then I'm going to continue my explanation. This game was played, by the way, in Moscow in 1949 between Grandmasters Goldberg with white against Tolush. Now what white played here, his first move, is h4. h4 is a very logical move. That's the candidate pawn, the pawn that needs to advance because it's going to become a pass pawn. By the way, in case you didn't know, we call this a candidate pawn because it's the only pawn of white that doesn't have any counter pawn of black on the same file. So this is what we call the candidate pawn. So it would be a mistake to advance the g pawn, because that's not the candidate pawn. This one can be stopped, so we need to advance always first the candidate pawn, h4. Now black took here on h4, white took back, and so then we have this passed h pawn. But of course black wants to use his knight to stop this pawn. If the black knight can control h6 or h8, then it will be very difficult for white to promote, because our bishop can only cover the light squares and not the dark squares. And if we use the king to support the advance of this pawn, then black will have time to create a pass pawn on the queen side by advancing the b pawn, the a pawn, and the b pawn again, and he will have a pass pawn here. So how did this continue? Well, black moved knight to e5 here. The idea of knight to e5 is to go to g4, where it controls h6. So now we see the principle of preventing the activity of the opponent's pieces. White played bishop to f5. And yes, I know that some of you are thinking now, Mashnu is making a mistake. He doesn't see that black is threatening to give a check on f3 and capture the h-pawn. Yes, I did see that. But let me show you how the game continued, and then you'll understand. Actually, this is a trap. Now white played bishop to f5, preventing the knight from going to g4. So yes, black did give the check on f3, and white moved a king to f2. And yes, indeed, black took the pawn on h4. But what happens now? Here you start seeing the similarity with the previous video, that fragment where we saw that a bishop can control all the squares where a knight can go if the knight is on the rim, on the side of the board. Here it's done by the move bishop to e4. So there we see the same idea, that the bishop controls all these squares. So this knight is not allowed to go to any of these squares. Well, it could go to g6, and that's what happened in the game, but it didn't help much, because here the game continued with king to c7, white played king to g3, attacking the knight, so the knight must go to g6, but then of course we trade this knight. Bishop takes g6, f takes g6 and f7, and there we are. White has a complete won position. So in this position black resigned. What's so important about this example? Well, actually the idea of go to that position again, bishop to f5, controlling g4. Actually the whole strategy is to take away the important squares for this knight. So yes, he can go to f3, but now we have the second example of the same theme. With bishop to e4 we control the squares where this knight could go. So after king to c7 we have this won pawn endgame. Alright, a short example, but I hope that you recognize the same idea as in the previous video. And when we repeat the same ideas in different examples, we remember them easier. So perhaps in one of your games, one of your future games, you will recognize this pattern. Alright, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on YouTube.